The fighting has intensified in and around Gaza's main city of Khan Younis in recent days, as the Israeli military say they have now breached the defensive lines of Hamas, which is designated as a terror group by multiple countries. The IDF released footage of its troops operating in various parts of the city, which they believe to be a stronghold of the Islamist militant group. As Israel expands its offensive into the south of Gaza, Palestinians are being forced to flee the fighting and ongoing bombardment. Thousands are heading daily to shelters in the south, where there's still no guarantee of safety. In a rare move, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has invoked Article 99 of the UN Charter to warn the Security Council of an impending humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. He urged the members to demand a ceasefire. In a letter to the Security Council, he wrote, "Without shelter or the essentials to survive, I expect public order to completely break down soon due to the desperate conditions, rendering even limited humanitarian assistance impossible." Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people have been told to relocate to so-called safe zones, but the UN says nowhere in Gaza is safe.
Survivors sift through the rubble of a destroyed home, struck by Israeli missiles in the early hours of the morning.
There were 30 people inside the house, 20 of them were children. We don't know what happened to us. The fire hit and all of it collapsed on top of us. None of us made it out completely okay. Everyone is hurt.
The United Nations says almost 1.9 million Gazans have fled their homes since the war began. Many wound up here in Khan Younis. Now Gaza's second largest city is a battleground. Israel says it's operating against Hamas strongholds in the south, and both sides report that the fighting is fierce, leaving civilians with nowhere to go.
All my senior colleagues have been very clear, including the Secretary General, saying there are no safe places in Gaza.
Speaking to DW News, the Israel Defense Forces explained why they fire on safe zones.
Now, if Hamas uses what has previously been defined as a safe zone in order to fight and to fire rockets or missiles at Israeli civilians or to conduct combat activities towards our troops from that area, then there may be a case where we will retaliate fire. But that is an extremely small percentage.
The main hospital in Khan Younis is overwhelmed. The UN says delivering vital aid supplies is impossible amid the fighting. And still, the injured keep coming, as do the bodies. The devastation in Khan Younis has left many Palestinians with a sense that the world has abandoned them.
We need someone to stand by our side. We need someone to find us a solution. We are devastated.
But despite a brief ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the renewed fighting is as intense as ever.
Let's pick this up with journalist Sami Sokol in Jerusalem. Welcome back, Sami. Let's start with a claim from the Israeli military that they've found what they say is one of the largest weapons depots in Gaza.
Yeah, indeed, the Hamas, as we know already, has produced weapons of various kinds in underground. There are underground factories inside the Gaza Strip. In fact, in the 7th of October, Israel was surprised with the scope of the equipment, the military equipment that Hamas has. And what we see in what the IDF was showing is both from the Kalashnikov, the AK-47 machine guns, and all the way through RPG, anti-tank, and the long-range missiles that are aimed at Tel Aviv. So this is definitely one of the achievements of the IDF in this operation. And they were stating that this depot in the north of the Gaza Strip was in a residential area, and it was not far from some schools and a clinic.
Right. Now, meanwhile, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is now at risk of total collapse. He's called for a ceasefire. It doesn't look like Israel is ready to comply.
No, indeed. Israel is now talking about accelerating the campaign in the Gaza Strip. Benny Gantz, who is in the war cabinet, he was saying, we're listening to our friends, but we're doing what's good for Israel. And what the leadership in Israel believes is that continuing the military campaign is what's good. And Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defense, said the other day that by doing it, it will also make the Hamas surrender and release the prisoners that are kept by Hamas.
Right. Of course, at the centre of this are the hostages taken by Hamas in October. And we've had today these leaked audio recordings of a meeting between the Prime Minister and freed hostages, which appeared to reveal criticism from those hostages of how the situation's been handled. Just talk us through their criticism, Sami.
Indeed, very harsh criticism. We heard it both from those who were held kidnapped and also their family members who participated in this very big meeting. And what the hostages were saying is that when they were held hostage by Hamas, they were scared not from Hamas. They were scared of the bombings. They were terrified by these bombings. And they said that one of the hostages was saying, "Where is your intelligence? You bombarded right next to us." And they described a situation of big fear. Another thing they said is that they demanded the release of all the hostages, and they say that Israel has missed an opportunity to release the hostages by refusing to release the elderly and the men. And they were saying that the men that are kept hostage there are suffering more than the women. They described a very difficult situation there, and they said that they have to be released now, and one cannot wait anymore.
OK, thanks for that, Sami. Sami Sokol in Jerusalem.
DW's senior international correspondent Fanny Fadl joins me from Jerusalem now. No UN chief has taken this action in half a century, Fanny. Guterres urges that the maintenance of international peace and security is at stake here. How has this been perceived in Israel?
A lot of people here in Israel will agree that there must be an end to this cycle of violence. There must be an end to suffering and some way out of it. But if they look at the remarks made there by the head of the United Nations, they're also very skeptical, really, whether a resolution can be even achieved. And once it's being voted on, really what the result is, because one has to understand that there are 5 permanent members in that Security Council. And those permanent members include the United States, the closest ally of Israel, that has made it clear over and over again that they are not supporting a ceasefire. Right? What they do call for is rather a humanitarian pause. So the United Nations wanting to bring this issue once again to the voting floor is, of course, something really important. And it comes down here among a lot of Israelis who really want to see an end, a way out of it as a positive situation. But on the other hand, there's a lot of skepticism revolving around this, because while we are talking about it, that war is raging on in Gaza Strip, and it's really just unclear how long and how intense this is going to continue.
Fanny, you're also monitoring developments in Gaza. Specifically, what can you tell us about the situation in the southern city of Khan Younis?
We're hearing from the Israeli government, from the IDF, the Israeli forces, that apparently that house of Yehya Sinwar, the presumed mastermind behind the October 7th attack, that his house is encircled. Now, it is unclear whether he's in that house in the city and whether his family is in there. it's completely unclear. What is known that there's fierce fighting in Khan Younis going on between Hamas militants and the IDF. And while that is happening, thousands of people are forced basically to leave a city that was deemed safe just a few weeks ago at least. That's what Israel said. Meanwhile, people here that are missing their relatives that remain abducted there in Gaza Strip are hoping to find out any sign of life, any sign of about the whereabouts and the state of their relatives. And in fact, there was an exhibition in Tel Aviv yesterday, again, recalling what's been happening there. That really doesn't mean a lot of recalling what happened in October 7th at that Nova Festival, but once again drawing the world's attention to what happened there on the grounds on October 7th, and where hundreds of people have been killed, with shoes and other remains lined up there at the exhibition. Let's have a look at the report.
Handbags, shoes and toys. Many of the people who owned these belongings were killed. An early morning of trance music turned into nightmare. Hamas fighters stormed the festival just kilometers away from the Gaza border and gunned down as many people as they could. The organizers of the festival have recreated the venue in Tel Aviv. For them, each item displayed here is a reminder of the terrorists' brutality.
We built this exhibition in memory for all our friends we lost, all the people from the community that have died on the 7th. Our purpose with this exhibition is not only for our country to see it, for the whole world to see it.
In Israel, a strong sense of sorrow is visible everywhere. More than 130 hostages are still in Gaza, and Israelis want all of them back.
The feeling is the hostages must be released. That's the number one cause for the whole situation. There shouldn't be one more day of hostages being held there. Not women, not elderly, not children, no men. They all have to come back, all of them one by one.
I'm feeling frightened, scared, aggravated, angry with my government, useless government. And I'm hoping that this situation will be resolved quickly and peacefully, as much as possible.
As the fighting continues, Israel has also been losing troops. This family is mourning the loss of a young soldier killed in Gaza.
I hope that this is my last friend and the last soldier, but I know it's not gonna happen. And we have to, but we're gonna pay a lot of prices of soldiers. And these soldiers, they are, first of all, they're son of someone, they're friend of someone, they're human being. And this war is, the price of this war, it's really, really high for everyone. It's really, really high.
Many families in Israel, as well as Gaza, are overwhelmed by grief. And with no signs of peace, the war is likely to bring more suffering to both sides.
Funny, as we've seen in that report, people in Israel are sad and angry. 2 months since the Hamas attacks on Israel, what do people feel their government should be doing right now?
A lot of people that I'm speaking here in Israel are saying that actually this government is not the right government to find a solution to this. In fact, a lot of people say that Prime Minister Netanyahu is responsible to what happened on October 7th, underestimating actually Hamas and Hamas militants, which is classified a terrorist organization by multiple countries, that they were able to carry out this terrorist attack to begin with on October 7th. But you will also hear voices of people saying that Netanyahu is doing what he has to do, and that is to take revenge on what happened on October 7th and wipe out, from their perspective, Hamas once and for all. What a lot of people here underestimate, I think, is the fact that Hamas is not only seen as described and classified as a terrorist organization, but it is also a social movement in Gaza Strip, but also within the occupied West Bank. There are people who do support Hamas because they see the Hamas militants as their way, their only alternative, in fact, and also other militant groups to voice their frustration over the decades-long conflict with Israel. Having said that, there are really mixed reactions in terms of what's the way out of it. And a lot of people, what they're telling me is that they're missing a vision, really a vision both for the security of Palestinians and here, Israelis, a vision for peace and security for all.
DW's senior international correspondent Fanny Fadl reporting from Jerusalem. Thank you.
Well, Afia and N Weinberg are two sisters whose cousin Itai was taken hostage by Hamas on the 7th of October. They're here in Germany for a meeting with Chancellor Scholz tomorrow. Thanks for coming in. Welcome both. Let's start with what happened to Itai back in October.
So Itai was visiting his parents and our grandmother for the holiday. He doesn't live in Kibbutz Be'eri. He lives in Tel Aviv. And on that morning, we were witnessing the attack through WhatsApp group, our family chat. It started by Orit, Itai's mom, asking us to pray for them, saying that they hear bombings and shootings in the street. After a while, Itai's father, he was in a different house. He told us, they're inside the house. Please call for help. And that was the last message we got from him.
Right. And since then, you have heard nothing. You've heard and seen nothing of him.
So since then, actually, just a few days ago, we got a sign of life from Itai for the first time after more than 50 days.
And what was that?
We got it from one of the hostages that were released and was held with him the whole time. And it was that he's alive, which was, you know, a big release for us because we didn't know even if he's alive until now. The Red Cross didn't see him, didn't meet him. None humanitarian organization met any of the hostages. So we really didn't know. But we also understood from them that he is in a very bad mental state. He is suffering from deep anxiety. He witnessed his mother being murdered before he was taken away. He was with her at her house, and he saw Hamas terrorists shooting her, and then they took him away. We know that he assumes that his father was also murdered because of that text message. And he thinks that his whole family that lives in Kibbutz Be'eri are all dead. He knows that his sister was the only one that was far away on October 7th. So he thinks she's the only one that survived. Besides that, we know that Hamas terrorists are doing psychological terror on the hostages that are being held. They're telling them there is no Israel country anymore. They're telling them they have nowhere to go back to. No one cares about them. No one is doing nothing in order to get them out. No one is talking on them. And from what he knows, that he saw his mother being murdered, and he assumes that it happened to his dad as well, and he knows that the whole family lives in the same area. So, and in all the suffering that he's in right now, he thinks that's the truth.
Right. And tell me, when we had 7 days of this ceasefire, and I think 3 or 4 sets of hostages released in that time. So were you watching those hostages to see if Itai was amongst them, or were lists published previously?
No, the list was, the families had, they got the list before, right. And we all knew that it will only include children and women. Because
no men were, right.
Yeah, so we already knew that Itai will not be released during that ceasefire, during that deal.
Okay. So where does that leave you as a family? Because we heard just now in a report of families taking the Israeli government to task, saying they're not doing enough to get their loved ones out. Where are you on that? What do you think of the way the government has handled this?
In some way, we're also disappointed because it's been 61 days today and they're still not home, and Itai is still held hostage by Hamas terrorists. And we know that every day that goes by is a danger for their life. Their life is in danger. They're barely getting food. They're getting one slice of bread a day or just a bit of rice. We know they haven't got any medical treatments, any medications. And we know that their life is limited in time.
So what should the government have done then? Should the Israeli government have agreed to another ceasefire? Because as the way Hamas tells it, it was Israel that was blocking this. I mean, you know, you don't know that we weren't in the room, but that's the Hamas story.
I expect the Israeli government to put the hostages on first priority.
So does that mean then keep having ceasefires until they're all out? Or as the government would say, we've got some out and we got them out because we kept hammering away at Hamas, and this is how we expect to get more out?
Well, I know that there was no deal on the table, and if there is a deal on the table that could bring Itai back, I expect Israel to take it, even if it includes ceasefire. I think that the hostages must come first.
Right. You're meeting Chancellor Scholz tomorrow. For what reason? What do you want from him?
Itai is a German citizen. We've been here. It's our second time right now in Germany. We've met Chancellor Scholz in the past and many other politicians before. And our expectation from Germany is to treat and handle this case as German citizens that were taken hostage, and to treat it in the same way they would have treated if it would happen on Germany's land.
So what do you believe they haven't done that they should have done?
I think right now that the whole world needs to level up the pressure that they're putting on the countries that are playing a mediator act in this situation.
It's like Qatar.
Like Qatar, like Egypt, like Turkey, the countries that are feeding Hamas, that are hosting them, that are housing the Hamas leaders. And I know that if the pressure would be, hard enough or big enough, it would happen and the hostages would be released.
So, Afir, what do you want to hear from the Chancellor tomorrow? You go and have your meeting and he will nod and listen. But what do you want, in an ideal world, what do you want him to say that will go some way to putting you at ease?
Of course, in an ideal way, I would want him to tell me that Itai is coming back today, tomorrow. But I know he can't say it. So I would like to have his promise that he is treating Itai as it was happening in Berlin, and that he is putting the hostages' life in first priority.
OK. Thank you both for coming in and talking to us. We wish you well with your meetings. Afir and N Weinberg, thank you.
Thank you.